Let me teach you how to make the best beef curry ever. Aloo gosht or beef and potato curry is super flavorful and not hard to make. I'm going to start by cutting my beef into small cubes. This is top round, but you could easily use chuck roast. We're going to be simmering it for so long that pretty much any cut of beef is going to get tender. It takes about 2 hours to simmer, and we're not going to use a pressure cooker because it's more flavorful when you let it simmer low and slow over a longer period of time. So this is about 3 pounds of beef that I'm using here, and I'm going to chop up 2 onions. These are medium-sized onions, that's why I'm using 2 of them, but if you have a very large onion, you could just chop 1, and we're going to do like a rough chop here, and they're going to cook for so long that they're going to actually almost disintegrate anyway. And then I'm going to chop up a couple of tomatoes. 2 to 3 tomatoes should do it, and you can also rough chop those as well. And then we're going to cut up some potatoes. I'm going to peel them first. And I like to use Yukon Gold potatoes. This is because when you chop them and leave them out, they won't turn gray like a russet potato or a white potato would, like an Idaho potato. These, you're going to add them at the very end of the cooking process, so after 2 hours. So if you chop them in the beginning and leave them out on the counter, they will not turn gray. That's why I always use Yukon Gold when I can. Now that we're done chopping our veggies, we're going to move over to the stove, and I'm going to heat some oil on high heat. You want enough oil to cover the bottom of your pan, and you want to use a rather large, wide pan for this so that the beef cooks evenly. Then we're going to add our chopped onions after the oil is hot. And we're going to fry the onions for a good 10 to 15 minutes until they're very golden brown. So you can just put them on high, let them sit there for a good 10 minutes without touching them. And then you'll see that they've turned very golden on one side when you go to stir them. And then just leave them on high for an additional 5 to 10 minutes to allow them to become golden throughout. Then I'm going to add 2 heaping tablespoons of ginger and garlic paste. These are the combined ones, so if you have the separate ones, just add a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of each kind to get the same amount. And then we're going to saute the ginger garlic paste down with the onions. And then I'm going to add the Sean meat masala. I'm showing you 2 packages because they changed the packaging slightly, but these are the same thing. And for 3 pounds of beef, I'm going to use the entire packet, just 1 packet.
All right, no
now
problem.
We want to saute the spices down with the onions for a minute or so, and then we're going to add some water to loosen up the spices and allow them to simmer. This is going to develop the flavor of the spices so that they don't taste raw. And I want to thank some of my commenters who actually told me to do this, and other people, I've seen them do this in their videos as well. So that's where I got that tip from. So I'm just going to cook these spices down, and then after that, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of tomato paste. This is going to add a richness and a deep flavor, but tomato paste also has to be cooked down so that it doesn't taste raw. So cook it down for 1 to 2 minutes in the masala mixture. Then we can add our chopped tomatoes, and we're going to allow those to simmer for a couple of minutes, get a little bit soft. But again, this is going to simmer for so long that all of these vegetables are going to cook all the way through and get completely soft anyway. Then we can add 3 heaping tablespoons of plain yogurt. And the trick to having the yogurt not separate when you add it to the curry is to allow it to get to room temperature. So I took the yogurt out before I started cooking. So before I started cutting my meat and my veggies, I allowed the yogurt to sit on the counter, and then you want to whisk it. So you want to stir it in the container and then add it to your masala or your curry, and that way it will not separate or get grainy. At this point, we can add our meat, and then we're just going to stir that in really well with all of the masala. And then once it's all stirred together, we're going to add enough water to just cover the meat. That is going to allow the meat to cook all the way through and evenly. You do have to add some water. Although our goal in the end is to have a thick curry, I'm going to show you how we're going to simmer it uncovered at the very end to get that thick result. So then we're just going to add the lid. And I put it on high for 5 minutes to allow it to build up the necessary steam. And then I turn it to low and simmer it for 2 full hours for the meat to get tender. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to set the timer for 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then the last 15 minutes, we're going to cook the potatoes with the dish uncovered. So I'm going to show you that in 1 second.
This is a long process.
So this is after 1 hour and 45 minutes. And the first thing we're going to do is make sure our meat is tender. So I'm just going to take a small piece, and I'm going to take a fork and just make sure I can break it very easily, and see I can. That's beautiful. And then I'm going to add my potatoes. So you can see the curry is still quite watery. So we're going to we're going to put the heat all the way up to high, and then we're going to bury the potatoes under the water so that they cook evenly and all the way through. And then we're just going to let this simmer uncovered for a good 10 to 15 minutes to finish off the full 2 hours. And that is going to cook the potatoes. And see, once it reduces how dark it looks, this is the color that you want. So at this point now, I can test one of the potatoes to make sure that they're soft. And this was only 2 potatoes, so they cooked pretty quickly. But if you were to add like 3 or 4 potatoes, I only added 2, they would take a little bit longer to cook because the more you crowd the pan, the longer it takes to cook. But that's perfect. And now we can just garnish with some cilantro. And this was actually so easy to make, even though it takes quite a while to simmer it and to get the beef tender. It's actually not a complicated dish at all, and I really hope you give it a try. It is absolutely one of my favorite dishes.
Beef curry.